platform for help with everything from website updates to creating video content. Hiring affordable and reliable freelancers has never been easier.
What's going on?
Connect with a freelancer in minutes.
Everybody, what's happening? Abdul, what's up, baby? Jump on in here. So what's going on, everybody? Abdul, here we go. Chad, what's going on, buddy? Abdul, what's up, brother?
Hey, hey, hey.
All right, let me turn my TV off here. What's going on, man? How you
Good.
doing?
Pretty good. You?
I'm good, man. I just got done working out. I'm like already like wiped out, man.
Yeah, I saw. That's crazy.
I was like, let me get it in before this IG live, man. How you doing over there on the
Yeah,
East Coast?
I'm good. I'm good. Just been busy, but the weather here is not super great, as you can probably see.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
this is cloudy, but
Okay.
it's, it's humid here. Is it dry heat there, or is it humid?
It's pretty dry heat. I'd be guessing, but I think it's like in the late 70s. Kind of perfect. I mean,
Gotcha.
it's
Oh, that's
California.
awesome.
It's it's
Yeah.
California. We're spoiled out here. Yeah,
Oh man.
it's good, man. But I miss New York. I want to come back, man. As soon as things.
Yeah.
It's like we're
Once
the
it
bad
quiets
ones.
down.
We're the ones you guys don't want there now. It flipped. It's like you guys are like, stay in
It,
California.
exactly. Oh my God. It's crazy, and with everything going on, it's like we can't travel. There's so many restrictions, but we just have to, do what we can just to stay safe.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I mean, not even to get into that whole thing, but it's definitely real. And I just, I had COVID, and then I just found out my
Hmm.
aunt, and I just found out yesterday, my aunt, her husband, her daughter, and her daughter's daughter, so her granddaughter, all tested positive, and they're
Oh
up in
wow.
Bakersfield, and I'm like, whew. So
Oh my God.
it's just it's all over the place, man. I
Yeah.
don't know why people. I don't know. The whole mask thing. I don't know.
Hmm.
It's people don't want to wear their damn masks, and
Nope.
so what can we do?
Yeah. Exactly. There's unfortunately people are going to do what they want, and there's nothing really we can do about that. We can try and enforce as much as possible, but at the same time, it's just going to make things worse because people are just going to, they're going to fight it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, one
we just have
hundred
to make
percent.
do and just protect ourselves.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
I know as people are joining, we'll give it a couple minutes before we kind of start
yeah,
talking.
right, right.
Uh, but basically what I wanted to go over today was a little bit about you. So it's mainly going to be you talking today, me and everybody else listening. And the reason I'm doing this is, I find myself in a time of, and not just since George Floyd. I mean, this is I mean, it's been a lifetime journey, of
Yeah.
figuring out, you know, um, uh, who I am, where I stand in society,
Mhm. Right.
what part do I play, you
Yeah.
know. So I think since George Floyd, it's definitely been it. Well, I say for me, it really got like I really started focusing more on awareness, like not that I never cared, but just focusing more after
Yeah.
Trayvon Martin and
Hmm.
after Michael Brown, because I went to Ferguson and was part of a organization over there. So through theater, I got to do some writing and education on uh, situations there in St. Louis. And that was the first time I learned about. We went to the university and just started learning about systemic racism in the sense of like, I had no idea, like, African American couldn't buy a home in certain areas. Like, in my mind, growing up in LA and New York, it just,
Yeah.
it, racism's always been there, but it just in a different way. You know, I
Yeah,
grew up.
it's evolved over time.
Yeah, and I just didn't. I thought that stuff was all in the old days, and they had
Mhm.
told us that that didn't stop till the early '90s. But it was illegal
Right.
for a white person to sell a home in certain sections
Yep.
of. I couldn't believe. I mean, so that's why I
It
wanted to do
blows your
this.
mind.
Yeah, I wanted to do this today because I have conservative friends, um, not just white. I mean, you probably follow my post. I have a lot of
Yeah.
military friends that are African
Hmm.
American, Hispanic, and I'm military. And we kind of think different than the general civilian.
Yeah.
Sometimes people say we're brainwashed. I don't agree. I think we see patriotism different. Um,
Mhm.
we deal with brotherhood in the military different. But what's
Yeah.
interesting is a lot of my African American friends have said they dealt with racism in the military, and it was stuff
Hmm.
I was like unaware of as well. So I wanted to
Yeah.
bring you on to talk to us and educate obviously the people who are already woke and kind of progressive, and because I
Yeah.
have those friends too, and you see they go in it on my posts, and I'm kind of a guy who I get myself in trouble sometimes, but the truth is, you know me well. I'm actually very loyal, and I always look for
Yeah.
the balance. So I
Right.
wanted you to educate us a little bit, and so some of my friends could learn these things that, like I
Mhm.
learned, like even my white friends, and be like, oh shit, that's why. There's a group,
Right.
there's a race of people that are very upset, and there's reasons. It's not just,
Right.
hey, look at me you
Yeah.
know so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
I
let's
totally
let's
see you
start
because
because people are in there. Let's start with you. Just tell us a
yeah.
little bit about you. Give us your bio, who you are.
Sure. So my background is I was born in Liberia, which is the one pretty much American colony. So um, the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the slaves, 1865, which is when it was, finally done.
Right.
And as we know, so one of the parts of it was that a piece of land was purchased in Africa, called it Liberia after liberty. Capital was Monrovia. Yeah, exactly. As my aunt is chatting in here, she's saying sort of colony, which is right. That's my aunt Baku. She's also super dope. And pretty much, that's where I was born. So there are a lot of similarities between there and the US. Um, I left when I was very little, so I don't know it as well, but my mom does and family does. So I can't speak to, growing up there because unfortunately I didn't have that opportunity, which would have been phenomenal to, see both sides.
Yeah.
Basically, we fled because of civil war, and at such an early age, going through that, and then we ended up here in the U.S. And then we've been here ever since. So, part of this is to, like you said, just educate people because, like you said, racism, it's been around forever, even predating American history. It's been
Right.
everywhere, ever, it's just a matter of how it's evolved over time, how people deal with it. You look throughout history, there are so many things you have, now ability. So it's just how we look at these things, internalize them, and then turn them into positives. Um, Looking at different demographics and acknowledging the things that have happened over time. Because I think a part of the problem is that, like you said, people don't know things are happening because it's evolved, so it's very subtle now. So it are those little microaggressions that that even we deal with. Growing up, I grew up here in White Plains, but you have friends who are come from the underdeveloped neighborhoods, and you have affluent friends. So White Plains is very diverse, and that's something that I've always been super grateful for. But at the same time, you have the kids who come out of the poor neighborhoods, where if you are a smart black kid, they will look at you differently and say, why are you talking white?
Mm.
That that's not a thing. It's just a matter of I happen to have a, an extensive vocabulary.
Right.
So it's just a matter of, how do we change the way we talk to each other, and then how do we change the way we approach other demographics, and how do we change the narrative of how they see us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, but that stems, even just the way we're viewed as African Americans, as Black people in America, that stems from slavery to Jim Crow to the Civil Rights era to the FBI, specifically their program with the COINTELPRO, and how they manipulated videos in the media to portray African Americans as hyper aggressive, hyper loud. You know, if you look at even when you look at corporate life, you see in stereotypical movies, you see a white affluent guy as a CEO. He gets upset, nobody says anything. You get an African woman or an African man, and they start to get upset, they're like, "Oh, whoa, whoa, hold on, why are you being so aggressive?" It's so it's trying to balance that to change the way we're viewed. All these stereotypes over time have made things so much harder to change the way we're perceived.
Yeah.
So it's how do we educate, even starting from young, how do we change the perception from kids, how they're viewed and how they view each other?
Yeah.
So,
Now,
yeah,
do you think that uh communicating and I feel for myself just right now. I was running. I ran from where I live. I ran 10 miles. So I ran into another community, which is east of, I live
mhm,
in Downey. So I ran in the Bell Gardens and through there, which is like heavily, I think it's like 99% Latino community. Um,
okay,
and then I'm saying hi to people. I took some pictures. You see, I just like to take pictures.
yeah,
I kind of communicate, even though a lot of the people I was communicating with didn't speak English. We kind of
right,
smiled.
yeah,
I was running back, and a Black guy was running with his daughter in a stroller, but he had no shirt running. He was getting a workout
hmm,
on, and
yeah,
he was on the street side. So I kind of made an effort. I went like, I'll take the street side, and he threw a
right,
peace sign, and we passed. And the reason I'm
yeah,
saying this is when it feels like, from my experience, when I've been amongst people outside of my culture, we
yeah,
get like, I never really see people being racist with each other. Like, it seems like when
right,
we're hanging out, if you're at a restaurant or a bar, people are getting along. People kind of,
yeah,
and but when people are divided and separated is
hmm,
when, and you know who else, I'm not going to lie, I got to say this, who I find that are really agitators on both sides are people who actually don't affiliate with the other race, whether it be
yeah,
white or Black. It could be white
yeah.
people who actually, they're like super out, they don't even affiliate with Black people, and they're so like gung-ho. And why is that? I don't know. What do you think? Is there something
That's a
about that we're not mixing enough and actually
yeah,
interacting?
yeah. That's a really valid point, and that's a really good point. And I was actually watching a video yesterday. It was about this guy. I'm blanking on his name at the moment because I had never heard this story before. But it's this African American man. He was a journalist, and he has Black friends, he has white friends, and the thing is that he himself was an educated person, and also, as my aunt just said, yeah, it has to do with education and how you're taught.
Right.
So,
See that?
but
Yeah.
then what he did was he had his secretary call the local leader of the KKK and say, hey, my journalist guy wants to have an interview with you, but he didn't tell him he was Black. So they set up the interview. They're going to meet at a motel, and so this leader of the KKK comes in. He's got his I forgot what they're called, a nighthawk or a nightwing.
A
I think it's
wizard or
called a
some
nightwing.
some shit.
No,
Yeah.
the wizard is like higher up,
Oh
but the
yeah, he's like the
Nightwing is like
boss.
his
Yeah.
guard.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So
Okay.
the Nightwing is like his guard.
Oh, okay.
So the Nightwing comes in with him, and so they're there, and then they have a conversation. is the first time this black guy is having a conversation with a KKK guy, and same thing. So what
Wow.
happens is that, they're both very guarded, you know, but the black guy is just trying to have the conversation to say, we're not so different. So, they part ways after a while. And then what happens is that he's like, at the end of it, he's like, is it okay if I call you? So the KKK guy actually gives him his card and says, sure, if you have follow-up questions, whatever, you can call me. So what happens is they end up talking a lot over the next few years. And over time, next thing you know, the black guy is being invited out to his house for dinner. Then,
Wow.
over time, he's being invited to the KKK rallies. Then, what happens is over time, like every time they would have a meeting, the Nightwing would come with him, as protection. But over time, the Nighthawk stopped. I keep saying Nighthawk. The
Yeah.
Nightwing stopped coming because they felt
They had a
comfortable with each other.
rapport.
Exactly. So what
Wow.
happens is over time, this black guy actually he changes his mentality and how he perceives black people. He ends up leaving the KKK and changing the minds of, I think he says, over 50 to 60 other people along the
Wow.
way.
Wow, that's a
So they left
powerful
the
story.
KKK
Yeah,
and
that's
they became best friends.
wow. Okay, that's
Yeah,
extreme and that's amazing. That's wow.
yeah.
It's like
And
if these two people
if I
could do
remember
that,
correctly, he becomes the KKK's godfather.
wow. That's crazy. That's interesting.
I think his daughter becomes the black guy became the daughter's godfather.
Wow. That's that's talk about killing hate with love, huh? I mean, the
Right,
patience that must have
exactly.
took for the
Yeah,
black guy to, because
yeah,
so I put a post earlier and I just
yeah.
couldn't address. Sometimes people just keep posting. I just stop looking after a while, and then they start
Right,
fighting with each other sometimes. But I
right.
seen a buddy of mine, a theater guy, African American, had put like a long post. Right? And it was right before I went live. But
Mhm.
basically, he was saying that I had put a picture of a little girl in a Klan's outfit looking
Yeah,
up to a black police officer. So she
yeah,
doesn't know what race is. She's looking at him in
right.
admiration, like, look at this guy, right?
Yeah,
And then I put a
right.
picture of a little black girl with the fuck the police sign, which is trending.
Yeah,
I just take stuff, it's trending. It's not like I found.
yeah, yeah.
And I
No, I saw
thought,
that one.
wow,
Yeah,
yeah. And the way I saw it was hate is taught. Although I
it's
do
true.
understand the difference,
Hmm.
because I think even you comment, my nephew, everybody
Yeah,
was explaining to me the difference, which clearly I understand that one comes from
yeah,
an oppressor and one is a
right,
result of oppression. But
right.
what you just said really nails the nail on the hammer, because that man who called the Klan member and put all that time
Hmm.
into this human being who he didn't need to. This is an oppressor.
Right,
This is He didn't need to put that much time into this white fucking asshole
right.
who's a racist, but he chose to, because by flipping him, 60 other people flipped. And that's
Hmm.
kind of what I meant with my post. I was saying that hate is taught,
Yeah,
and if even though we could be mad at the police right now, or especially people of color. I totally get it. But we still got to teach love, because the next generation coming up is, we can make changes in people. Not all, I know everyone doesn't like to hear
right.
not all cops are bad, but not all cops are bad. I mean, but there are,
Exactly.
systemically, there's a problem with the police department, and the movement is helping address that. So, anyways, I just thought your story kind of is what I was trying to say with
Yeah,
that post.
exactly.
You know,
Yeah, it's a great parallel, and it's totally true because it's just like how your post was. Because I understood right when you posted and I saw the two pictures, I knew exactly where you're going with it, which is
yeah,
exactly what you said, where you have somebody who has been taught hate but doesn't fully understand it yet because they're walking up to this cop and they're putting their hand on the shield, going, "Whoa,
yeah,
you're helpless." And then you have the complete opposite who, over the course of being oppressed, has now transferred that oppression to the child who now has the police, sign on it. So it's
right,
like, it's as my mom would say, it's a vicious cycle that we have to break. So, it's like,
Right.
where do we not necessarily draw the line, but how do we teach people that we have to acknowledge our past to be able to rectify those loopholes in government, loopholes in society, and how we treat each other. So that way we can not only address them, but how do we move forward together?
Yeah.
Because
Beautiful.
if we don't have both sides, we're going to have a problem.
I would love to use that point right there to segue into the conversation me and you had the other day. I'd like you to explain a little bit to some people listening or that are going to listen about education. Like, you really opened my eyes. I called my family. I was telling family members, and I was like, called my friend in Chicago, Gisela, and I'm like, dude, I was talking
Yeah.
to Abdul, and you opened my eyes a lot to how we're taught in school. So maybe you could explain some of that about how we
Yeah.
see all these white men as these great,
Yeah.
courageous. That was a
Capability.
great point.
Yeah. It was something that when I was thinking about the education process, here in America, because I was trying to figure out a way, how do I affect the people around me? So I was thinking back to how I was introduced to African American history in the curriculum in school. So, and as far as I can remember back, I think it's right around third, fourth grade where we start really diving into civil rights and African American history and all of that. However, African American history in the US starts at slavery.
Right.
So that's where little brown kids are introduced to their own history. But African American history doesn't start in America, it starts in Africa. So you have little brown kids learning about slavery at the same time that you have little white kids learning about kingdoms, medieval kingdoms, and um, uh, Genghis Khan and all of these dynasties, all these kingdoms that Alexander the Great. You find out about all of these great white guys who've done phenomenal things, and then you have all of these African kingdoms that were massive, and they're just skipped over. You
Hmm.
spend maybe a month on African American history, and the rest of it is Crusades and Alexander the Great and Greek history and Roman history, and the British kingdoms and Europe. But they barely touch on Africa, and then they go right into slavery, and
Yeah.
then you just pick up from there. So you have little brown kids already in their mind at such a young age saying, we're we're not equal because we haven't done anything. Like
Right.
we were slaves, but everybody else did all these great things. So it's a mindset that kids are going to grow up with. So it's how do we go back, change the narrative, and say, look, at the same time these things were happening in Europe, these things were happening in Africa, in the
Uh,
Middle East, and like brown people were doing phenomenal things, advancing medicine in their own way, because people don't know that. For example, in America, the process of inoculation, which is where you take somebody who's already infected with something and you basically give it to somebody else with a lower dose to prevent infection, kind of like what a vaccine does.
right.
That
Okay.
was an African thing. And what happened was back in I believe it was early 1800s, 1805, right around there. There was a particular slave. His name was I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but I think his name was Onesimus, and he was new slave just brought over to the United States, and there was an outbreak, and he told his master, he's like, hey, we have this thing that we do back in Africa where you take the pus from an infected person, you just take a scratch right here and you just rub it. They'll get a little sick, but then they'll be fine, and it reduces the chances of other people getting infected too. So they have a higher rate of survival. And because of that slave, that's how inoculation spread around the United States and it got itself into the military.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But, but they don't talk about that.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah. She.
So, yeah, so it's like things like that.
And it goes like endless with that. Like, I mean, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen like African American invented like the
Mm-hmm.
stoplights and open heart
Yeah.
surgery, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think Most Deaf, they did a
Including.
film on it. And I mean,
Yeah.
none of this was ever taught, you
Nope.
know. Um,
It's crazy. Like, for example, the guy who created the transfusion process, right? He, African American guy, he died because white doctors wouldn't give him white blood because he needed a transfusion.
wow. Wow. Yeah, that's fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Yes. See, this kind of stuff I think is important. I mean, and I remember learning a little about that. My grandmother immigrated here from Italy, and learning about like Meucci, and he invented the telephone but couldn't afford the patent, and like you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
so I remember hearing that. It's just I was never educated. And they never taught me that in school. It was like my family had to teach that about
Yeah.
anything great that Italian Americans did,
Yeah.
and then African
Yeah.
Americans. It's like such a wide spectrum of amazing things that have been accomplished by
Yeah.
African Americans. And
Yeah.
so when we had that conversation, it really hit me like, damn, it's so
Yeah.
true. They don't teach that. And I'm not gonna lie, Abdul. When I was a kid, okay, I remember like, and I've never really shared this because I never really thought of it again, like consciously. But I
Yeah.
remember when like they'd be teaching like slavery in class, like
Yeah.
when I was little, and
Mhm.
you'd see these like horrific pictures of Emmett Till, or, you know, and I remember there were moments where like you'd hear little giggles or like, ooh, like, and I'd like kind of glance over at like the African American kids in class, and they'd be sitting there, almost unfazed.
Right.
And as a kid, I didn't understand. I felt this empathy, like this is like why is it being taught this way? Like
Right.
if like they're inferior to us, or like or like it's almost like you
Yeah.
said, like white people did all this great stuff, like Abraham Lincoln and all these
Yeah.
men fought so hard to free these people, and then they show them in
Yeah.
chains, and you're
Yeah.
right, it's almost like I mean, or maybe
Yeah.
it is planned. I don't, it's just
It's
not
totally
something I
planned.
was conscious of.
Yeah, yeah, it's totally planned because even if you go back to J. Edgar Hoover, when he helped found the FBI, he himself had a lot of racist tendencies, and it wasn't really until 1970, I think it was 1971, when the whole program just kind of blew up, where some people broke into the FBI headquarters, and I believe it was in Pennsylvania, and they stole a ton of files, and they released them to the public, and that's how they found out about the COINTEL program, all of the and African American people. So you had J. Edgar Hoover quite literally just fighting against African Americans and other demographics as well, just
Yeah,
to keep the status quo of the white supremacy. Like we're the white supremacist or the racist or just white culture at the time was we are so much superior because we have all this power, we have generational wealth, we have community, and what they try to do is portray African Americans and other demographics that they didn't have that, which is true because of the systemic racism that existed and the policies that existed. They actively went against these demographics in a covert way. So nobody knew what was really happening except for those demographics that were being affected because they could see it because they were being affected. Everybody who else was not affected, it's kind of like now where people are starting to wake up to all of these racist things that exist, these microaggressions that people do and people say because they just don't see it every day. It wasn't known at the time. So we're at a point where back then nobody knew that all these things were happening. You know, people would get, like you said, you know, redlining, where you couldn't buy a home in specific areas because, you know, they were told, you know, black people can't buy homes here.
Right.
So it was, you know, it was a norm.
Right.
So it's unfortunate, but that's how we ended up to where we are today, where everything is exploding around the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So when we hear Black Lives Matter, right? There's still a lot of people I think that don't fully comprehend what it means to say Black
Yeah,
Lives Matter, right?
yeah,
I mean, I remember the first time I heard the phrase, and I remember the first time Colin Kaepernick kneeled, and
yeah,
the way it sparked something in me because I didn't understand, until I found out that Colin Kaepernick was a Navy SEAL that reached out to him and they met, and because Kaepernick was sitting at first, and he said,
yes,
"Hey, when we have someone wounded on the field, we kneel, just like football players. When
yeah,
somebody gets injured, everybody kneels until the
yeah,
player
yeah,
gets up and gets up. And all I think in soccer, a lot of sports do that. And
yeah,
Kaepernick started kneeling as
mhm,
okay, I'll meet in that because I'm not against the veterans or
yeah,
the flag, and that still wasn't enough, right? People still like
yeah,
once I started learning what Kaepernick was doing, I had no problem with it. It was like, oh, he's
yeah.
not disrespecting
Anybody.
veterans, or he's actually being so American by expressing his American right. Same with
Right.
Black Lives Matter, right? So
Yeah,
the statement Black Lives Matter is it's about black people mattering. It has nothing to do
yeah,
with anything else. Like people are blowing it. So when we hear all lives matter, it's
yeah,
yes, all lives matter, but this is about
yeah,
black lives. We're
right,
focusing on
exactly.
um
Yeah, and you what you just said is totally correct because I think the people who don't understand, I think it's because you see, one thing that I have found, you know, when talking to people or just even reading, people have a misconception between equity and equality. So equality is where everybody gets the same thing. Equity is where you are actually um, putting in place measures to be able to have everybody on the same playing field. So, for example, if you have 10 apples, right? And I have 5 apples, right? But our boss comes over to us and says, "Hey, everybody, you know, you've done a great job selling your apples, you know, last week. And, you know, Paul, you've got 10 apples left, and Abdul, you've got 5 apples left. But you know what? As a bonus, I'm giving everybody across the board, you know, 5 apples. So, you know, so that means that that's being, you know, that's being equal because I'm being given 5. So now I have 10. You're being given 5. So now you have 15. That
right,
doesn't put us on par. So that's equality. Equity, which is really what we want, which is where we're given the measures to be, you know, to be equal. That means that, hey, Paul, you've sold, you know, however many apples. Abdul, you sold 5 more apples. So you know what? You don't need any help because you've sold 5 apples. You still have, you know, that many. So, you know, so we're gonna give Paul, you know, maybe 5 oranges so that way he could lump them in with his apples and, you know, bundle them and sell them. So
mm.
that's, I mean, it's a terrible example, but you know, it gets the point across.
No, yeah, but I got you. I got right. Okay. Yeah, that's
So,
important because I think that again, this goes back to people, I only get to know some of these things is because I talk to educated people like yourself. And I think some of my friends, they don't get that opportunity. And
mm,
so, and I understand it. If you go on social media, man, holy crap. Because I have
yes,
both sides, like conservative friends, white
yeah,
friend. I got like prison friends that have been institutionalized racist. So they've been in. I have friends that've been in prison for 10, 15 years. So they
right,
come out. They're like, it's another lifestyle in there.
yeah,
You hang with your own race. So the
right,
post I see, Abdul, in one day will give you PTSD. It'll be a
right,
video of a kid being freaking attacked by 20 black guys at who knows
mm,
what happened or where. It'll be
right,
Then it's another one of a white guy, you know, lynching a black man. I'm like, holy crap. Then kids being molested. Then this. And
Yeah.
I think what happens is when you sit in your apartment and you don't get out and meet people,
Hmm.
and you have one set of friends that you follow, you
Yeah.
start to believe your way is the only way. And this goes
Right.
for all of us. I don't care if we're
Yeah.
woke all the way to, we all start feeling, and then out of like a human instinct is to argue and combative. We get
Yeah.
combative. Like, dude,
Mhm.
my ways, because it's all I know, so I must
Right.
be right.
Exactly.
How do
And
we
here's
start
the
getting
problem.
people to freaking talk? And
Great question.
because the protests are important, don't get me wrong. Protests,
Yeah.
yes, man, protests,
Yeah.
guys. I don't fully understand. One thing that bothers me, I'm going to go on record saying, is I look at like all these protest videos I see, and it'll be like 90% white people yelling Black Lives Matter and beating buildings. And I'm like, who are, like, are we losing focus on, let the African American people talk? Because I feel
Right.
like that always
Yeah.
happens.
Well, I think that goes back to, even, historically, it's what we refer to. When I say we, I mean there are just people who would just say this. It's what they call a white savior complex, where you feel like, for example, you get like a famous historian, a famous historical figure who just comes in and saves the day,
Right,
but it's always the new guy. It's like a Superman complex where it's like, oh my God, that fire is burning. I gotta swoop in there and save the day.
right.
So you have a movement that is so powerful, and then you have white allies, which is wonderful because
Yeah,
we can't do it without you. We need you.
sure, sure.
But it's a matter of, we we want you to speak up for us, but we don't want you to speak for us. That's the difference.
Yeah,
So it's a matter of, it's trying to find that fine line of being an ally but not being a savior. We want you to help, we want you to be involved, but you can't put words in my mouth,
gotcha.
because unfortunately, well, not really fortunately, but you've never experienced what we experience. Just waking up and leaving your house is a totally different experience for me and for you.
Right,
You go out, you take a jog, and you feel generally safe. And for me, I could go out and I'll hop on my bike and I'll go out for a bike ride, but I have to be hyper aware of everything around me, because at any point a cop could just pull me over and think I stole that bike.
right, right,
So,
right,
so I think that, that's part of the difference. I mean, I could be in, workout clothes, shorts, whatever. I've got my camelback on, but he could be like, I've seen that bike before. I'm like, no, I don't think you have. He's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you stole that bike. I'm like, I don't think you have.
right.
So
Yeah,
it's a matter of, how are you going to be perceived, and how, unfortunately, from everything that I've seen, how officers don't truly de-escalate situations. They go straight for the taser, or I mean, I'm not saying all officers, because
yeah,
it's the videos where these officers are being portrayed, where the first thing to do is they pull out the taser and they tase the person, or they say, "Oh no, he's resisting," and it's like, well, he's resisting because he didn't do anything wrong.
yeah.
So obviously, if
Or he's
because
scared and he's kind of
right,
fighting for his life at this moment.
exactly. Yeah.
Sometimes you
So
see in the videos, they're like, get him. And I'm thinking, man, the guy is freaky. He has no weapon on him, but
yeah,
he right away, he's probably thinking you're about to kill him.
yeah,
So it's not as
yeah,
easy as just stop resisting.
right,
I've
yeah,
been in
exactly.
violent attacks myself. I've been
Mhm.
jumped, mugged. I mean, I get it. When your adrenaline's going, you
Yeah,
know, um,
you
so
just feel
yeah,
bad.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's having, personally for me, the way I view the police is that you have so many good officers. But I think the problem is that, unfortunately, it's the bad officers who are enabling good officers to look the other way and not being held accountable for by those good officers.
And you just nailed something right there. Though at least me personally, and I don't know if this is my privilege or if I'm speaking out, but that's exactly how I feel about all of us across the board, whether it be the bad cops that are making all the cops, whether it be the bad whites, the white supremacists, the racists, the corporate white chauvinistic privileged men that are make all of us white men, the black men that are maybe in gangs and violent. And I mean, let's face it, not I can't give it all to like, well, it's a, you know, they what they've dealt with. Some people are just bad, white, black, Hispanic, that are violent and doing shootings. Then it makes all black men, and it's like I almost feel like we almost like people that are progressive and want to live in a good, clean, equal society with equity, and want to flourish. And it's like, when do we stand up? Because sometimes I feel like these other entities are moving into the movements. Like even with Black Lives Matter, you have this beautiful movement started, I believe, I could be wrong, but African American woman, LGBTQT, I believe.
Three African American women. Two of them, I believe, are of the LGBT.
Right. So you have these women that started this great movement, but now the movement is so, you have all these other entities. Mainly what I'm seeing are Caucasian white kids that are saying they're allies, but sometimes I'm like, well, are they allies or are they are they plants? They're like burning shit down. They're like, and I'm like, are you undercover whites? But like, it feels like they're hurting the cause sometimes. But anyways, when do we kind of get together, white, black, like, and be like, dude, we want our country, a real country of equality. I mean, that's what I served, and I always thought that's what we had, but I was a little blind and ignorant to what's really going on in communities of color. But I served with black men and Hispanic. I mean, we thought we were doing what we were supposed to as Americans, and then this stuff has really woken me up to like, wow, our country's not quite where I thought it was, but I have hope, you know?
Right. Yeah. I totally hear you, because it's just like you said, where you have these people who are supposedly allies, but then they start doing all these things that go against the thing that's part of the movement. So, one of the things that when I first saw the George Floyd protests, once everything started getting, I think it was about a week in, and the protests were just starting to really ramp up. And I remember seeing a bunch of videos that were so suspect, it was like, as I'm watching it, I'm like, wow, this actually reminds me exactly of the Quintuple program, where you had, I forgot, I think his name was Officer Daniel, where basically what happens, there was a Black Lives Matter protest. They were going down one street, super peaceful. There was no rioting, nothing.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden they turned the corner, and I believe it was an AutoZone, and there was a guy who had spray painted like free stuff.
I seen that. I seen that.
So
And he was a cop, right?
He was a cop. Yeah, and he was outed by his ex, I think it was like his ex-girlfriend or his ex-wife. She outed him because she's like, no, I know that guy. And because and then his mannerisms just in that video, where he was so calm and just took his, I think he had a
baton or something.
Yeah, it was one of those batons, or if it was a crowbar or something. And he would take his hand and just smash a window, take 3 steps forward, smash the next window, and not say a word.
Yeah. And people were trying to surround. He wasn't even scared. He was like tactically trained. And you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah. Because then the person who had organized that group of people came up to him and said, hey, man, who are you? Because you're obviously not with us. And then they even asked him, like, are you a cop? And that's when his mannerism changed, and he just did a 180 and just walked away.
Yeah. Wow.
And then people started following him. They're like, dude, you're a cop. Like, like you don't fit the role with us.
Yeah.
And then I think it was like the next day or something, or a few hours later, he was outed as an officer.
So you definitely have all these, there's so many different entities involved in
Mhm.
steering us away from what we're all trying to get to. I mean,
Yeah.
I would like to say most. I do think most of us are good people. I mean, I think of the people in my circle, and for the most part, I could honestly say, you know, they're good people and not racist. Then there's some, I'm not gonna, like, they got the jokes, they make, and you're like, I don't know,
Everybody has
I don't think that guy fully is getting it. But
Mhm.
I mean, that's the world we're living in, right? So I try to do things like this and
Mhm.
be an example, but mainly I feel like my part with all this is mainly listening. I have a big
Yeah.
belief of people of color having their platform with this stuff, because that
Yeah.
savior shit it annoys me. It drives me
Yeah.
insane when
Yeah.
it really does. I think um I get more outraged when I see that stuff. When it's like
Mhm.
you have a movement of people of color that are, and it's like white people being so passionate about being in the front
Yeah.
line, and
Yeah.
I, that throws me more off than the damn
Anything.
racism that's causing. It's like, because it's almost
Yeah.
like a double-sided race. It's like they have an agenda, I feel like. And
Yeah.
but anyways, that's
Yeah.
just something I'm dealing with, and I'm trying
Yeah.
to.
I'm right there with you because, and I think you just said it the best way possible, which is that people with privilege have to give the platform and enable us to be able to have the platform and just speak and say what needs to be said. Because one thing that you had touched on, earlier in the conversation is about the way that we're perceived, So it's a matter of how do we give the platform and then just kind of step back, you know? So it's a matter of how do our allies give us that platform and then take a step back to give us that moment to say what we need to say. And then, as you also previously said, it's a matter of acknowledgement. So, just like with any conflict, if you don't acknowledge there's a problem, you're not going to be able to address the problem and you're not going to be able to fix it.
Mm,
So you have to give that voice to where it needs to be given to be able to then have people listen and truly understand. Because, we could hear anything you want, but they're not listening. You know, the,
mm,
your mom, growing up would say, one in one ear, not the other.
right,
So,
right,
so they're not taking it in, they're not comprehending, they're not there to really participate. They're just there to be a sheep, just
yeah,
follow along. My friends are out here, so I came out here too. It becomes a social event instead of, we're here to protest.
right,
This isn't a social event for us. We're literally fighting for our lives
yeah,
because so many of us have been killed. And the problem is that, as I think it was Will Smith who said it, racism hasn't gone away. It's just being recorded. I mean, I'm sorry, racism isn't increasing. It's just now being recorded.
mm,
Because 20 years ago, we didn't have cell phones.
right, right,
We didn't have cell phones with cameras like this. We
yeah,
didn't have the Samsung Ultra 5G that has 120 megapixel cameras.
yeah,
It's like, oh, did you have a knife? Let me zoom in. Nope, you didn't have a knife. Things like that.
right,
So, 30 years ago, there were no cameras. It was just all Polaroids and stuff and camcorders. So obviously those could be tampered with. And then you have, go back even further, when none of that technology existed, where it was just photography and basic cameras, where, and grainy. I mean, you remember the TVs like even 20 years ago. So it's
yeah,
like, it's like, who do you believe? And at that point, it was like you would take the officer's word, like, the law. They were righteous. But now
right,
we find out, they're not. Because even look at Breonna Taylor's her police report, it is blank. They
yeah,
don't even mention that I think that they battered down the door. They don't mention that she was asleep. They don't they like it's so empty. Like when you look at it and it's just like you're just taking their word for it now.
Right.
You know, that's not okay.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's insane.
on another time, we'll talk about a personal experience I had when I was a different person, 20 years ago, and getting in trouble a lot. But an encounter I had with cops that was it was terrible. The way they handled things and planted evidence, and it was so bad. And what's funny is, as I got sober and changed my life, I remember looking back and going, well, hey, I was a bad guy. Maybe I wouldn't have straightened my life out.
Right.
And it's kind of what we've been doing for years when you think about it. People
Mhm.
just excuse when officers do something bad and like, well, I kind of wasn't. I think we're at a time now, what we're seeing is people like, nah, enough is
Right.
enough, and
Yeah.
we're being able to see so many men of color and I mean women
Mhm.
of color, but a lot of
Yeah.
men, I mean, we're seeing them being murdered like George
Yeah.
Floyd, I think really got everybody because you watched a man
Mhm.
beg for his mother and
Yeah.
die in the most inhumane way. And I think that
Yeah.
touched the souls of a lot of people because it
Yeah.
was the first time. There was like Rodney King and other things we've seen in the past, but then people
Yeah.
go, oh, but he was on a high speed chase. He was on.
Yeah.
So there was always a but
Right.
but
Mhm.
Eric Gardner, it was like, oh, but he got in a lot of trouble. And my cousin's a
Right.
cop over there, Staten Island, and there was just this perception of he had been in trouble many times, and you could find a way to go, okay, I guess you trust the cops. I guess they. But with
Mhm.
George Floyd, it really brought all those cases to everybody's
Mhm.
mind, right? Because now we're like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner,
Mhm.
and the list goes on, and you're like, how many of those were just like this,
Right.
and
How
again,
many were
like you
not
said
even
already,
recruited?
like you said, not all cops are bad. Absolutely, I'm a big believer in that. But the
Yeah.
ones that are detrimental to what's happening.
Yeah.
These are people's lives.
Yeah. They're not only detrimental to to the people that they're there to serve and protect, they're detrimental to the system itself. You
Mm,
know, and
mm,
then I think when I was looking into police reform when they started talking about it and like really getting serious about it, and I looked into other countries and how they treat their police officers in I'm sorry, not treat their police officers, but how they train their police officers. And some countries, in order to become an officer, you have to actually go to school. And it's not just like school, it's like you have to go to full on like civil training, you learn like civil rights, um, you learn the actual law as if basically it's like you become an attorney, because you have to understand the laws if you're going to then go and enforce them. Because,
mm,
and that was like a 2-year process. So you would do your firearms training, you would do your combat training, but you're also learning the laws and actual de-escalation protocol. And how do you ascertain if somebody's a danger to themselves? Or maybe they have a mental health issue. You know,
right.
so is that person just like that kid Elijah? I don't
Oh
remember his last
man,
name, but that one I felt
dude, that one I felt.
because here you have a kid who was, from all of his videos and from the testimony, he was such a sweet kid, playing violin and whatever,
Yeah.
and he was dancing, walking, or either walking or jogging home, dancing by himself with his headphones in, and just, yeah, he's flailing alarms, whatever, but he was by himself, not a danger to himself, just nobody approached him correctly. And if they
Yeah.
had were for 5 minutes to like maybe instead of just approach him like that, maybe follow him for a few minutes. So, just see, is this kid really a danger to himself? Does he pose a danger to himself, to others? Or
Yeah.
maybe, you know what, maybe he's just a happy go lucky person, you know?
Yeah. No, you're right.
And
That one, man. I know we only have 5 minutes because they cut us at an hour. Um,
yeah,
unless
they
you have
cut
more you want to
them.
talk about, we can relog in. That's up to you. I don't have nothing to do, but it's up to you. If
No,
not, what I was going to say
no,
is,
we could still go on if you want. I don't mind.
yeah, well, what I wanted to say is, so you come from a powerful lineage. I mean, your family, your bio, I put it up for people to see. I mean, I think your ancestors will be incredibly proud of the work you're doing. I know you, aside from just doing these talks about civil rights and these issues, but just in theater, I mean, you're committed to making the world a better place, and I think that's noble. And I'm grateful to know you.
Thank you.
And what would you like to say to people before the time cuts? If it does cut us, then we'll relog in. But just kind of throw out to people on both sides. But I'm mainly talking about people that are not aware, because the people who are aware and woke, and a lot of people are, I'm talking to, the everyday person who's kind of a good person but doesn't understand what we're talking about fully. What would you like to say to them?
For me, I would say you have to be understanding that your belief doesn't make you right. A belief is what you've been taught to be known as good or moral compass. So you have to understand that your belief system doesn't make you right. Historical fact and understanding and educating yourself of those facts will hopefully change your beliefs, to know that there are more people out there who are good from all demographics than there are people who are bad. We're just hyper focused right now on the bad because that's what we're trying to change. If we take the time to educate ourselves properly, openly, and be welcoming to new information, new data sets, and don't focus too much on the news. Read history books. Go on the internet. We have full-on computers in the palm of your hands. Take 5 minutes a day. Google, Black facts or Latin facts. Pick a demographic that you don't really know much about. Just take 5 minutes, learn something about them. You'll find that you probably have more in common than you think, and that's where you bridge the gap. Because by having meaningful discussions like this, that's where you fill in those gaps where you don't know about another person or another demographic. And that's how you come together, and that's where you find the love that separates us all.
Man, I love that. That's it, man. That's the message. I love that, Abdul. Look, man, I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll do another one,
yeah, man.
A follow-up. But
Yeah,
I hope that we all start communicating. I love that. That was a great message. Start just researching. And I would say that for everybody.
everybody.
If you're out there and you're African American, research Italian American, like besides
Yeah,
the mafia, like I know we all love to watch the mafia. I do that too.
yeah,
But
the Godfather, man.
what if I mean, who doesn't? But Mexican Americans,
Yeah,
Asians, and I
yeah,
think that's great, man. And I think
yeah,
most importantly with African American, we all need to do some research on the great things that the culture has given us, not just hip
yeah,
hop. We all
yeah,
love. We
yeah,
think
yeah.
hip
You
hop,
can
and
look at
it's
the
like
history, man.
which is great. I love hip hop, but there's
Yeah,
so much more.
yeah.
Um,
There's so much more, so much more. I mean, there's so many little things. Like, for example, everybody knows Thomas Edison, right?
yeah.
But nobody knows that Thomas Edison and the light bulb didn't work until Lewis Latimer, which was a black guy who created the carbon filament, which made the light bulb long lasting.
Wow.
But he's
Yeah. I
lost
did.
history.
See.
You'll
Yeah.
find
That.
something new every day, I promise you. You just take 5 minutes to Google some facts.
I'm gonna promise that I'm gonna start doing that. Um,
Yep.
Please, when I post something, if it ain't right, it's giving us a minute and a half left. If it isn't right,
Yeah.
like you do, let me know. I think that's important for all of us, not to get, we get crazy on each other on social media, and I think that's
Mm.
ridiculous. If someone posts something that I feel is offensive, and I know the reality of it, comment on it or send them a private
Mm.
message, or
Mm.
I think what's
Right.
important is that we all stop being combative. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that from like a chump. Oh, I'm scared. I'm
No,
not
no, no.
scared
It's
of
so
being
totally fine if
combative.
you are.
I don't want us to be combative. You know, I know where that could go, and it's
Yeah.
never going to be good. You
Yeah, yeah,
know,
yeah. You want to approach anybody who's from the other side from an open heart and with love to say, look, I understand where you went wrong, but here, let me show you.
I lost you, Abdul. It got cut off. Jump back on here. I hope you see me, guys. So I just had a amazing 1 hour conversation with Abdul Tutman. This guy, follow him, reach out to him. He's extremely knowledgeable. He comes from a long, uh, impressive family. Let me bring him back in. Jump in here, Abdul. So he should be jumping in right now. We're going to talk a little bit more, but I posted the video if you want to watch it, catch up on it, and here we go. We got cut off, so I hope everybody jumps back in. Hey, okay.
We're back.
It said we had a minute and a half, then it just like cut us off. I'm like,
Yeah.
so, well, now we have a little more time. I think, you know what I wanted to say, if people jump back in, let me shut my door because, so my gym is literally behind my building.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and now they've been working out outside because LA closed all the gyms. So now they're doing these boot camps outside, and it's awesome. But they start at 4 to 5, 5 to 6. So every hour, and the music they're like black drives me nuts. But it's insane. They start at 4 in the morning, dude. I love my gym, but I'm like, come on, it's 4 in the morning, and they're like out there, come on, give me 10, give me 20. I'm like, holy crap.
The Rock.
Yeah. You would talk a little bit. So, well, since I have you for a few more minutes, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Yeah, I want to, if anybody has any questions, I didn't get to address any questions on the last post because we were just talking, but go ahead and shoot them in their chat or whoever's in here. But so I mean, I feel like we kind of covered so much, and you left us on such a beautiful message with, I really love that, you know, Google, you know, look up, take 5 minutes a day. I love that idea. That's like going to be a new thing. I'm going to be like pitching to people. It's like, take 5 minutes a day just to research and start seeing what you have in common with each other, you know?
And it's so important for people to remember that we do have more in common than we do than not. And I think, you know, the problem is that because we've been so divided for so many years, it's hard to have those conversations because, you know, people who don't, as you said, are isolated and don't normally associate with people, how do they come together? It's because both sides feel like they have no common ground. So unless you find that common ground, because, you know, if you take the 5 minutes to Google something, you say, oh man, I've heard about this thing, you know, maybe I could bring that up in conversation, you know, icebreakers, common starters. You know, it may be a little awkward at first, but that's how you chip away. Just like the story I was telling about the African American journalist with the KKK guy. It's not
Yeah.
like they became friends overnight. They spent the years to become best friends, which is crazy to think about, but you know, they made it work.
Yeah.
By having those conversations.
Yeah. Let me ask you, how do you feel about it's interesting to me that I seen yesterday, like they did the opening of baseball. I think it was yesterday, but like, and I think it was the Boston Red Sox. Was it the Red Sox had the Black Lives Matter banner?
Yeah.
And I seen backlash, and I'm thinking again, like this is something. It's being posted. See, that's I see it as, oh, that's beautiful. It's paying. They're paying homage. They're paying attention. They're saying, hey, Black Lives Matter. We care. We you
Yeah.
know. Uh, but then I see some of my friends on my post or associates that are like, I fucking quit on sports. That's it. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, and I get that. I get because where they're looking at it from is the wrong angle. They're looking at
Yeah.
it like,
Don't
oh
bring
my god.
politics in the sport.
Yeah. And it's like, why can't we see that and say, wow, that's beautiful for everything that's been stripped and taken from African American? Even if people always go slavery was hundreds of years ago, it's like it wouldn't matter if it was thousands of years ago. The point
Yeah.
is that what happened is still having effects today.
Right.
What's wrong with acknowledging that and saying Black Lives Matter? I mean, that's I mean, half the athletes, if not more, are African American that we admire. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like Spike Lee
Yeah.
had that in Do the Right Thing. That was my favorite scene with John
Yeah.
Turturro and Spike Lee. And it's like,
Mhm.
you love, Michael Jordan, you love Mike Tyson, but
Yeah.
but you're racist. And it's
Yeah.
what?
It's easy.
What do you have to say to that?
There's so much to be said, but then I think that goes back to having the conversations and acknowledging these atrocities in history. Plus, when people say, oh, it was 400 years ago, that's inaccurate because the first ships landed 400 years ago. Slavery didn't end until 1865. And even then, at that point, you just had a bunch of black people who pretty much had no semblance of life,
Right.
we were trying to then start building their own societies and communities, which were then also burned down and destroyed and
Vandalized. Right.
repeated. So it's like, and then even up until the 1950s, we still didn't have all the rights. And then, and then when you go further than that, it wasn't until even like the 1970s, 1980s, where we started pushing further. And then we're here today where we're still having issues because it was slavery to Jim Crow to civil rights to war on drugs to mass incarceration to police brutality, which has just been an ongoing issue overall. And
Right.
then we're here now where it's just everything is being flooded at it because I think it's one of those things where we have had all of these things swept under the rug for the past 400 years. And then now, because we have the technology, the spotlights are just exploding. It's just like, oh, you screwed up here, you screwed up here, you screwed up here, you screwed up here. So it's just like you have all of this anxiety, and then coupled with the pandemic where everybody's home, so everybody wants to be on social media and see everything that's going on because they can't be outside. So now everybody's just hyper aware, hypersensitive of everything that's going on in the world. So you have two things going on at the same time where you have pandemic, hyper aware and hyper acuity, and then you have social issues. But people are forgetting that the Black Lives Matter movement is not a political thing, it's a humanitarian thing. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the problem. People are associating it with politics. When yes, it's political in the fact that we need political reform, such as fixing the loophole in the 13th Amendment,
Right.
and would fix mass incarceration. Not fix it, but it would help. It would help not being an enabler to mass incarceration. But we also need to remember that it's a humanitarian issue where for the past 400 years, just black people have been things and not people. And then when we were legalized as people, we still weren't treated as people. So, and then we couldn't still have all the civil liberties and rights, and then we had to fight for that too.
Right.
So it's where do you draw the line to say eventually we're equal as other people? I think
Right.
that's the problem. Is like now because of all these other things going on, we're at the point where because everybody's slowed down, we can now start to acknowledge all of these things.
Mm. Uh, Man, you keep like turning lights on in my head for me. So, and I'm learning. Like I said, I'm learning as I go. But something you just said about coming from slavery wasn't 400 years ago, like you said. 1867, I believe, is when it technically
Mm-hmm.
slaves were free. But then throughout that, you had, um, so now it's like, here, you're free, go. But there's no education. There's no people been here for hundreds of years. Like, so then you build communities, and then through that you have to deal with all the racism and the Klan and all the things that came with that. Then all the way up to the 50s and 60s, you still couldn't eat at certain restaurants. Segregation's going on in the South. So all this, and when you think of 1960s, that's really just yesterday in the frame of hundreds of years. I mean, that's not a long time ago. And then what I'm taking out of that, I'm saying to my white friends who don't fully understand everything, but it's kind of like you commit a crime, white guy, I'm saying, you commit a crime, you go to jail, you and I'm only saying this from like certain experiences. So now you're in a holding cell. There's 3 white guys, 30 black guys, 50 Mexicans. You're outnumbered. You know what it now feels like to be the minority in the house and all the strength be in another side. So you band together with your 3 white guys. You do what you have to do to survive. You get out of jail. You're on parole. You can't get a job. You can't do that. And I'm saying all this because I have specific white friends that have been through this that I'm friends with. And I'll hear them say things about how, like, which is true. They're in the system. Now they're felons. They can't. And I'm like, that's
You
what
can't
you're
vote.
saying is what it's like as an African American from birth.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly right. They
It's
say that the statistics are 1 in 4 African Americans will be in somehow in the prison system. So,
wow.
and then you think about that, the mass incarceration from the 13th Amendment, you have to remember that if you become a felon, you cannot vote. So if you get one, and remember that if you get 1 out of 4 black people to not be able to vote, that's a lot.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely sways, and you're only 13% of the
Right.
population, I believe, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, and another thing about incarcerations, because I have a lot of friends that are like, dude, I did, time, I did 6 years in prison, but it's like, yeah, but as white men, we chose to commit those crimes and got caught. A
Right.
lot of black men, a lot have been, and women or people of color, Latinos too, have been arrested for nothing.
Yeah.
I think a lot more, if we were to break it down, a lot more innocent
Yes.
people have been locked up of color than I would. And I could be wrong, I don't know,
No,
but
no, you're probably right. I don't know the statistics offhand, but you're
me
probably
neither.
right. But there's another problem too. Well, I should say there are multiple problems, but one of the problems that hits me offhand is the fact that when you commit a crime, and I don't know, everything about the police system, but from my understanding, you commit a crime, you can't post bail, right? So if you cannot post bail, which a lot of the demographic cannot post bail because of these super high, bail amounts that are
Right,
being set
amounts.
for minor crimes, um, that bail cannot be posted. So that means that they are now in jail doing the jail jobs because the whole prison system is geared towards free labor and slavery,
Right,
as we know, due to the 13th Amendment. So you have now a massive population of free labor that
right.
is based on innocent people.
And you have people employed, right? Bailiffs,
Exactly.
jail, judges,
Yep.
parole officers, probation
Yep.
officers,
Yep.
narcotics officers. And
Yep.
again, I'm with you. Anyone out there listening, I'm no expert on prison reform, or we're just dialoguing. But I'd
Exactly.
imagine most of those jobs are held by white people. Most of them. If you were to
Yeah.
look at narcotics officers,
Yeah.
judges, I don't know. I could be wrong. Lawyers, and so
I
we
think
have basically the war on drugs have now built a whole economy on incarcerating people, and mainly we know for a fact it's people of color. Again, not to say that all the white people, for my white friends out there that have been incarcerated, not to say you weren't victims either, but the numbers I think are much
the
bigger in
numbers are
the
very few.
community of
Very
people of color.
Yeah, I was reading something, and I was reading something earlier, and I don't remember the numbers offhand. I could find it. It's on my. I think it was on one of my Instagram stories. But it's basically people forget that when they look at statistics and they see something on the news, they have to remember that those numbers have probably been skewed a certain way. So the way statistics is supposed to work is you have to essentially all statistics should be on some sort of bell curve. So which means that you've now normalized the data. So you take out the outliers and then you just make sure that your main data set fills certain parameters to say, that it's um, uh, that the parameters are equal, being across the board. So when you normalize the data and you have apples to apples instead of having all these random variables in there, they find that white crime and black crime for specific you know specific types of crime are fairly on par, and but then you have the whole terminology of black on black crime, and then you have no terminology of white on white crime, and that's particularly to hyper focus on black people as being criminals. So
Right.
there's no such thing as black on black crime; it's just crime.
Right.
So
Right.
you have to remember that if you look at black on black crime, and that specifically when they make that terminology is usually in regards to murder. I believe the number is 53%, of people of black on black crime versus I believe it's 42% of white on white crime. So when you look at those numbers, they're not too far off. That's a 10% variance. That's not a
Mm.
big deal. So
Right.
you have to remember that everything. But then when you have fraud, I believe the number was 73% against white people in the
White people.
fraud.
Yeah. Yeah. I could imagine that. Yeah.
So it's
I
like it's really funny.
Now, I will say that's an interesting topic. I've been in many of those conversations amongst my white friends. Uh, because that's a I just want to speak real. That's a big one. I think that when it comes to like what's happening in communities like Chicago, New York, and
Mhm.
with the violent, even though spread across America, I think that's still an important issue. I mean, it has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. Like when people go, oh, like they'll show a video of a black man shoot like another black man and be like, well, I guess Black Lives didn't matter. And it's like those are two
Right.
totally separate issues.
Mhm.
That's you're talking about violence in a community, which we don't even know the circumstances of that shooting, if it was gang related. And I think anybody who's been incarcerated or in the streets understands streets have their own codes, and we
Right.
can't lump in black people or white people or Latinos in gang culture. Like,
Yeah.
yes, there are more gangs
Right.
in
Plus, you
certain
have to take
communities.
plus you have to take into account that most crime is opportunistic. So,
Right.
which means that it's going to happen in your own neighborhood.
Right.
So, who are the people that you probably live with? It's people who look like you.
Yeah, exactly. And when people say things like, "Well, why is there?" So I've had these comments in conversations of, "Well, why when any state you go to, when you're in a black neighborhood, and I used to think, I used to question that myself, Abdul. Like,
Mhm.
well, how come it's always like ghetto, like,
Right.
and then as I got a little more educated, I started to realize, well, maybe because the systemic situations that are happening, poverty, lack
Mhm.
of jobs, and you
Yep.
see the racism, lack of people being able to progress. And then
Yep.
I'm like, oh, maybe it's set up this way. And it
Yep.
isn't that black people just want to commit fucking crime. How
Yep.
about they're in, violent gangs happen and stuff because of the
Yep.
surroundings? Um,
Right. Think about it like this. What are the three things you're going to find in an African American neighborhood? You're going to find a liquor store, you're going to find a check cashing place, and you're going to find
pawn
a
shop.
corner store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To buy
Yeah.
guns. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So those are the three things that if you go to any African American neighborhood in the world, you're going to find those things. Why?
Right.
Because those are the first staple things that they're going to put there to make sure, that alcoholism is rampant, that
Right.
you have firearms, and maybe be able to get those firearms under the table. You're gonna have
Right.
access to tobacco, like all these things that are detrimental to your health and your brain,
Right.
they're gonna be put there. So,
Yeah.
you have to normalize being against those things being in your neighborhood. I'm not saying, if you want to have a drink, go for it. But, to put those things in there and give open access to it, that creates a problem that itself is a systemic problem.
Totally. Yeah, I totally understand. And I mean, that goes, I think, for, I'm not too familiar with Midwest but I'm sure if I was in Oklahoma in some trailer park area of mainly white people, probably going to find a similar thing. And I'm always trying to bridge a little bit for my white friends and stuff to kind of hear this conversation. Like, damn, he has a point. Abdul's saying, because I don't think people think of all these things, and they're just thinking, they see these violence in Chicago and they see this stuff, and it's there's so many factors. I mean, not that any of that's excusable, or fraud, or 73% of America being white criminals committing fraud. That's not excusable,
It's actually 65.4%.
Oh, is it 6? That's a lot.
It's still a lot, though. I mean, compared to arson, though, you guys kill that. 71%.
Which one? Arson?
Yeah.
Oh, and
However,
mass shootings. Mass shootings have to be.
Mass shooting, but DUIs, you guys have 81.2%.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. That's as of 2018 data.
Yo, white people, stop drinking and fucking driving. My people, what are you doing? Yeah, you're right. That's probably because I don't know what that is. Or maybe privilege. You're like, fuck it. I'm driving. I'll pay for the DUI school.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, they whatever I don't know. They think whatever they'll get away with it. They'll get off with a warning, or they'll get a what's it called? They'll get an escort home.
Yeah. Glow said mass shootings. Yeah, mass shootings. That's a whole nother conversation. That's got to be 95%. Why? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have that one, but yeah.
It's got to be high. I can only think of a couple of mass shooters that were white. I mean, there's maybe 3 I could think of offhand, and it was the gentleman in Dallas in 2016 that shot those cops. He was African American, but other than that, they've all been white. So
I can't think of any.
And the DC snipers. Remember, that's it. That's the only white.
Right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
So, I think we're covering a lot of really good stuff. What can we do, bro? What can we do? What can we do besides I know you mentioned some great stuff already, but as a black man, as a man of who's, I don't know, it's just amazing the bloodline you come from. I think without getting into it, it's amazing. What can we do to be allies? And I'm talking about the people that are not going to get out there with pickets on. They're like, man, I'm not fucking. Listen, in defense of a lot of my friends, because I got friends I got friends everywhere, but I'm saying I'm speaking to a certain demographic of white guys, conservative guys. In defense of them, they're not going to get out and picket or march, or they work 12-hour days. They got kids, they got family, but they want to help. They want to be part of progress and change. And I always tell people that could be just like saying hi to the guy that walks, or the black family, and starting a conversation. I don't know. It doesn't always have to be being on the front line.
Be against Karenhood,
Right. Definitely.
Don't be a Karen. If you see a black family, having a barbecue, in public or whatever, just say hi. Just don't, obviously don't approach them, just being like, all over the face.
Hey.
I want to be friends.
Right, right.
Just walk over, be a normal person, and just treat them like you would want to be treated, just like anybody. Look, everybody wants a relationship with other people. It's embedded in us, but it's a matter of we've been so divided and so isolated as demographics that we've lost touch on how to communicate with each other. And not only that, but technology has made it more difficult and more anxious for younger people to communicate with each other in person. So, to be able to discuss things openly in a heart to heart manner, to just say, hey, look, you know what? I'm not colorblind. I see you, and not only do I see you, but I see your struggle. And I may not understand everything that you go through, but I'm here to enable you to have the discussion with me so that way I can maybe figure out in my own way how to help you. Because like you said, not everybody can go out there and picket. I personally have not gone out and picketed, but that's because, I have asthma, so I have to be careful with the whole coronavirus thing and whatever. So, what I do is I do research, I write, I read, I make donations to, the ACLU, the Southern Poverty Law, the EJI, specific programs that I know have been doing phenomenal work. Just put a little research into it. Look at Black organizations, but then also do your homework. And because obviously you don't want to just donate to every Black organization you can find, do your homework. Find something that means something to you, whether it's prison reform, whether it's, the whole, defunding the police, which, by the way, is not actually defunding the police. It's a reallocation of funds, which I
Fine.
think, right, because that's a whole other topic which we can get into if you want, but it's a matter of understanding what hits home to you. What do you care about as you? Do you care about children? Then you know what? Find African American programs and donate to those. Do you care about your police force? If you have a police force that you love, you know, just like I do, I love our police force. We have I mean, I'm biased, but I think we have a great police force. I have a lot of friends who are on the police force, and they are wonderful humans, and they do so much in our community. So, I love them. I go to events, for them and stuff, and we donate. So, if that's your thing, then find, African American programs uh, that help with the police, or find police programs that specifically help with African American demographics, things like that. So, like I said, if you take 5 minutes every day to just Google a topic of your interest in relation to African American or Latinx or, Asian American or whatever have you, whatever demographic you want, it doesn't have to be African American because minorities in general have not been treated well in this country.
Right.
It's historical fact, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, at one point, Italians were not treated well in this country.
Well,
And,
yeah.
you have to
Yeah.
remember that
And
Italians
it
had to
wasn't that
fight.
long ago,
It was,
but
30
that's
years ago.
another conversation, right?
It exactly. And people have to understand that everybody at some point was an immigrant here. Not everybody, who comes from another country is bad. And people have to remember that most crime doesn't happen from immigrants. It happens from people who were actually born here and were domestic crimes.
true,
So
true.
people who come here, they want to blend into society. They're not trying to stick out like a sore thumb.
Right.
So, people have to take that stigmatism out. They have to pull the stereotypes out. They have to remember that they're still people. And they have to remember that you were once a kid also. And when you were a kid, you didn't hate other people. You were taught that along the way. So you have to remember before you had all the hate, prejudice, and bias, who you were at that point. When you just were curious about the world and just wanted a hug.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a beautiful segue into closing out, man. I love the message of love. I mean, that's what I've been trying to put out there too, is, you know, love and unity. What do you have to say for the people who are fed up and they're coming at this with more aggression and violence on both sides?
Yeah, both sides.
You know, yeah, definitely, definitely. And you know, my belief personally is sometimes violence is needed in life, unfortunately. Yeah, let me rephrase that. You can always go without the violence, but sometimes violence is the only way some people get the message, right? Like sometimes you got to let a kid burn their hand. By the way, this is an Italian soldier. We hang them on in our house. I don't want anyone out there thinking, what the fuck is in the background and why is it hanging? It's a soldier and it's an Italian thing. But just I don't want no one out there being like, what, did the fucking guy have something hanging behind? They're talking about race and this white guy has something like just it's an Italian soldier. It's a tradition. So anyways, yeah, you know, I always think we could get further with peace and unity for sure. But you know, I get it. Sometimes you got to burn your hand to be like, oh shit. And right now, people are angry and rightfully so. But I just feel in my heart like, guys, let's start getting somewhere now. Let's start unifying. Because the violence, man, it's getting overwhelming. It's been overwhelming for a long time.
Yeah, it's been this way for a while, but I think it's a matter of like now, like you know, like we were touching on before, everybody's become hyper aware and hypersensitive.
Yeah.
So coupled with the emotions that we've had and everything, it's a matter of being understanding of others. And you know, you actually, yeah, this guy 150 1523 Glow, he's saying that, you know, things can be taken the wrong way, but you have to remember is that you have to, the best way when something like that happens, which is, you know, part of the same conversation, is that you have to be in the mindset where you have to let the other person say everything they need to say and don't interrupt them, because if you interrupt, you're going to break their thought process, and you have to let them finish everything they need to say. They could be totally wrong. They could be wrong with everything they said. What you have to do at that point, it's your responsibility to truly listen, make mental notes, or just pull out a pad and paper and just say, look, you know, while you're talking, I just want to write some stuff down so that way I can address the things you're saying and we can come together to figure it out. Because that's the only way to truly, because if they don't appreciate the fact that you're taking the time to pay attention and truly listen, then they're not there open-heartedly. And that's how you know. You have to remember that when you come to the discussion, you have to be open-hearted and you have to be willing to change your beliefs if necessary. Because like I was saying before, your beliefs doesn't make you historically accurate and it doesn't make you right. It just makes you believe what you believe and continue your own cycle, which you're going to eventually pass on to your children. So you have to remember that the people around you probably think the same way you do, but if they don't, you know, you have to be able to have that conversation openly and be understanding of where they're coming from. And then you have to be open hearted to be able to change if your perception could be wrong.
Right. And that's interesting to bring up the whole Confederate flag thing, because me personally, growing up in LA, New York, the Confederate flag never meant anything to me except for y'all lost. Like, you know, we're Yankee. I'm a Yankee fan. Like, I never really put it into my mind except for the Confederate Army lost a war, you know, and now that this is such a big thing, the Confederate flag and the statues coming down, and I'm like, you know, it's easy for me to be like, so what? Take the fucking statue down. But then lately I've been thinking like, all right, let me try to understand where these Southern white people are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Not the racist ones, but because I'm sure there's some, because I've met some kind of like Southern boys in the military and stuff that like Texas boys and Mississippi boys that kind of just, you know, white dudes, chew tobacco, love the country, weren't racist, but kind of probably never hung out with city folks or black people, or and they love that Confederate flag. I never thought twice on it. Just like whatever, it's some southern, you know, them.
It's a cultural thing. It's not, you see, at that point, it becomes a cultural aspect of the South. It's not necessarily that they agree with it, they understand that they lost, but it could be a factor of that they're holding to ideals that may not necessarily represent them, but they've been conditioned to.
Right, right. So what I was gonna say with what you're saying is about having your beliefs are fine. This could even touch into religion, right? Like I'm Catholic, but I have a lot of problems with what priests have done and how the Catholic Church has covered up a lot of sex scandals. Like that's been a big conflict of mine over there. Like, man, wait a minute, taking certain things out of the Bible, and I'm like, wait, like, but this is what I was raised believing. So what I've started accepting was it doesn't mean that what I believe about Catholicism, about Jesus or God is wrong. It means that human beings have tainted things, just like the American flag. I love this country. I serve this country, but our country hasn't been equal to everybody. Doesn't mean I don't love the country. It means we have work to do. And if we're true patriots, if people want to kneel, it's okay to kneel. And the whole, if you don't want to kneel, I love, okay, hold the shoulder, but stand in unity with that African American man or woman that's kneeling. Show them that we care. Doesn't mean your beliefs of America or what you believed it stood for are wrong. I believe it stands for all the beauty that I've always believed. The problem is now I've been awoken to, oh shit, there's systemic issues here. So with the Confederate people, I'm like, guys, okay, you're proud to be from the South, but that flag it's hurting so many people of what it stood for. So no one's saying don't be proud of your great grandfather and your grandfather and your grandmother who were from Mississippi, but what we're saying is that flag and those statues are causing a lot of pain today, and they have for many years, to other Americans. So
you have to remember too that most of those statues were not built then. They were only built in the last 100 years.
wow. That's even more discerning, right? Like when you hear that, you're like, why would you put a statue of a slave owner up? And it's not like it was there in 1400 and you're like, okay, I guess it's like you just chose to put that shit up. Like you could have put someone else up there, you know?
The statues, if I recall correctly, were the like daughters and granddaughters of like these Confederate people. Like they're the ones who actually, fought for the statues to go up in the first place. And now they're all freaking out because everybody's like, "Oh."
Yeah, it's. I think this is the dialogue that's good, man. I really appreciate this, and I hope people start having more of this. I think right now the media and social media, it's. I hope what we did today is good. I mean, I know we got in a little bit of rambling, but I hope people dig what we said. And I learned, again, man, I learned a lot from you. I want to continue these dialogues with you. When I come back to the city, we're definitely going to hit the spot on Houston Street. And when when things are safe, you're come to LA. You definitely got a home here, bro. And let's continue these dialogues, man. For anybody out there, please, man, let's move forward in a progressive way together. We got to listen to each other. We got to have empathy on it. I feel like a lot of people just want to forget it happened. Like, okay, slavery happened. Okay, here, we kneeled for George Floyd. Let's move on. And it's like, it's not that easy.
Right.
It's
you see that's where it comes back to. You have to acknowledge the atrocities. America has done wonderful things in human history. However, they don't acknowledge the atrocities they've done. Look at Germany. Germany is the prime example for a country that has committed world atrocities and has turned around to be a beacon of peace and hope.
Right.
Because if you go to Germany, Nazi salute about it. Like there is no holds barred for them. You
Yeah.
do a Nazi salute, or Nazism in general is just banned.
Yeah, you're right.
So
No statues, nothing of
nothing.
Adolf Hitler. It's like
Nothing.
they're ashamed of that part of their history.
And they teach it, they understand it, they know about it, they accept it, and they have moved on from it. Here in
Right.
America, they hide it, everything is secret, they sweep it under the rug, they pretend it doesn't exist, and then they procreate the issues and make them worse.
Right.
And that's where we're at today.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
We haven't acknowledged it yet. No, nobody, the government and society and our powerful leaders have not stood up yet and said, you know what, I mean, not all of them, I'm saying the majority of them have not stood up and said, hey, we have a systemic problem. We need to go back, look at our Constitution, look at things that we hold so dear, like the Constitution, July 4th, the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to people who are not white. And then how do we recognize? Because you have to remember, 1776, July, we declared independence, Revolutionary War. I think it was 1789 when the Constitution was ratified. That did not apply to Black people. So that means that the Constitution does not apply to Black people. That's why we had to have the amendments to make it apply to Black people. And we had to
Wow.
pass laws to make it apply to Black people. So we need more revisions to close the loopholes that have been open.
Wow. So when we hear all men are created equal, when that was written, they weren't they
When all
legitly were
men are
not
created
talking about
equal,
Black
Black
people, is
people were
what you're
still
saying.
things.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
when all men were created equal, Black people were still things.
Wow. See, like that's something I never actually thought about. I've
Yep.
always just thought about like all men are created equal. Like we did
That's why
this for all
Juneteenth,
of us, you
right?
know?
That's why Juneteenth is so important for African Americans, because that was our July 4th.
Mm.
We on July 4th we were not free,
Wow.
so it doesn't mean anything to us.
So July 4th, African Americans were not free. So when we're
No,
celebrating, wow. I see, I didn't know that. I seriously didn't know that. You know, that's
right?
crazy. That angers me. Because for years
Yeah,
I've celebrated it, assuming
right.
it meant, wow, look at our nation. This is when we were all one. But
Nope.
that's not what it was. It was white
Right.
people are free.
Right.
Yeah, see that's it's crazy, man. And
Yeah.
then to see the Juneteenth, you know, no one even knows. I didn't know what that was. I would see a bunch of my Black friends posting this last, especially this last Juneteenth. You know,
Right.
a couple of my buddies were really like took their families out, and
Yeah.
I was like, I had to Google it. I swear, I had to go. I'm like, wait, what the fuck is Juneteenth? I had to
Yeah.
Google and go, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And it almost my first, see, if I didn't Google it or have this conversation, Abdul, as a white person, I see, oh, they're celebrating Juneteenth. What, they're too good to celebrate 4th of July? And we're not
No.
even realizing that this wasn't for them. That's how fucked up that is.
Yeah.
So for years, you're celebrating holidays that weren't, you're going to school and seeing them like dressing up in red, white, and blue. And as an African American, you're like, wow, that's nice for you.
Pretty much.
See,
It's like,
people,
oh,
that's
great.
what we gotta see. This is what I, and if anyone knew this stuff and you're still angry about Black Lives Matter, that's a problem. Like I didn't
Yeah.
know this stuff. So
Yeah.
now I'm learning it and being like, whoa. Again, it doesn't mean, guys, that I don't love America or we don't
Right.
have to hate America. We have to say our country's not perfect and it's been fucking brutal to many people, but we're talking about African Americans and how do we rectify that? you know?
Right.
And
Yeah.
Glow just said, "How do we fix it?" And it's like I don't know. I think that's what me and Abdul are
See?
talking about. He gave some really good tips, but I'll let you continue, Abdul.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't look, I don't have the answers, but I think that discussions like this, education reform, police reform, plugging loopholes in policies and government, policies, government laws, plugging those loopholes, like closing the loop on the 13th Amendment would be massive. I mean, how do you say that everybody's free except if you commit a crime? Which then is like, oh, well, now we can just have everybody just be criminals and then we'll just have slaves again. It's things
Wow.
like this where have to we have to look at the policies that exist today. We have to look at how they have systematically changed our history and how we went from black people are things to black people are now quasi people to black people are now people, but now we can also make them slaves. And now, how do we make sure that we give them not equality, but equity?
Yeah.
Because it's, like I was telling you before, the difference between equality and equity is drastic. You can give everybody 5 apples, but somebody who already has a billion apples doesn't need 5 apples.
Right.
So you have to give the person who doesn't have that more so that way they can be on par. That's why I think education reform in regards to funding needs to be changed. Like how do you have um, the funding for schools tied to your tax rates? So it's like you have very, very wealthy neighborhoods where that are taxed very heavily, so they have the best education and can
Right.
afford, better books and stuff. And then you have poorer neighborhoods, or poorer cities that get no funding, even though they actually need the funding to be able to teach their kids. So then they're like, oh, you're not doing well, so clearly why would we give you more money since you're not doing well with what you have? That's not
Right.
how that works. It's no equity.
Right.
So, so that doesn't help. So we need to change education. We need to change how education is facilitated into the schools itself. How do we teach African American, Mexican, Asian histories correctly, including the atrocities that have been done, so that way kids know, hey, you know, even if you teach just African history, you have to teach pre-colonial Africa and you have to teach post-colonial Africa. Africa itself is the only continent in the world with straight lines because it was carved up for resources. So
Mm.
you have to change that. And I'll tell you a personal story in regards to that aspect. So my grandmother, um, and my mom actually just told me the story a few weeks ago. So my grandmother was one of the heads of the Tanzanian bank. So she was at the time going to be trained to be like their version of like the national treasurer. This was like back in I want to say like this like late 70s, early 80s. So um, a bunch of these African nations were invited to the UK, right, to tour the vaults, learn about because these were all countries that were under British rule at the time. So they took all of these people who were being trained to then take those higher positions. They brought them to the UK, and so they're doing these training sessions or whatever. So then they tell them on this particular day, hey, we've got a treat for you. We're gonna take you into the British vault. So they go down into the vault. Now this is where they have everything. That is like everything. They have a vault full of gold, vault full of diamonds, minerals. Like if you go in there, it's like insane, right?
Yeah.
They walk into the first room and it's filled with gold, right? So they look around and they're like, okay, great. This British guy, he's in his full suit, probably down from Huntsman and Savile Row. So he's, very prim and proper. And so he's taking them in. He's like super excited, just to show off the British wealth. So he turns around and says, this is the gold room. So then the Ghanaian guy looks around and goes, so this is your British gold. And so the guy's like, yes, this is our British gold. So the Ghanaian guy goes, oh, can you tell me where in the UK your gold mines are? So the guy who's like, what? He goes, your gold mines. Clearly, this is your British gold. Where's your gold mines? Knowing full well that
They
all the gold in
stole
that
it.
room was from Ghana. That was his gold.
Wow.
So because Ghana was known as the Gold Coast, so all of that gold in that room was from Ghana, stolen from the country.
Wow.
So then they go to the next room. It's the diamond room. The Sierra Leone guy looks around the room and goes, "These are our diamonds, sir."
Wow.
So
Everything's just been taken from.
yeah, everything was theirs. Everything in that vault was African. And then, you go to the British Museum, it's all African stuff. And the reason why it's all African stuff because they say that, oh, we can't take care of it as good as they can.
It makes me think of all the cities we live in here in California. They're all named,
Yeah.
um, Santa Barbara, Santa Monica. They're all named after Latinx, Latino names, and it's
Yeah.
like,
Mexico.
but
So
they
is
don't.
Texas.
But no one wants to let them in. Like that. That's got to be infuriating. And I'm not
Yeah.
making a big political statement about border controls, but
Yeah.
it's got to be infuriating to be
Yeah.
watching what was yours being flaunted by,
Yeah.
like, it's exactly what you were just saying, is British guys like, look at our gold, and it's like, that's our fucking gold, dude. Like, that you took. um
I mean, look, think about it like this. And I'm gonna say this because there's no other way to really say this. So you have the Jewish community, right? And the largest atrocity against them was the Holocaust in recent history,
right.
right? Everybody in the world knows who Hitler is. Have you ever heard of King Leopold II? He was the ruler of Belgium. He killed in the Congo upwards of 12 to 15 million Africans.
Damn.
Nobody's heard of him. It's not taught. It's
He
just
killed
completely,
double what Hitler did, pretty
yeah,
much.
yeah.
Wow.
And
Wow.
he's not really looked at. He's glanced over.
I never even heard. I mean, until you mentioned him, to never heard, never was taught. I mean, I've
Yeah.
went over, World War II stuff a million times in school, movies.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
It's because as ironically enough, even though I have qualms about him now, but as Kanye said, yeah, at the time it was when he said Bush doesn't care about black people, but it's the world doesn't care about black people. They never have. We've just been things to them. We've been access to resources for them.
Wow.
They we have been, I guess you could say, doorways to vast wealth and nothing more. And that's what's sad.
It's devastating. It could enrage. I could see why people are enraged, and I mean, what can even be said about it? It's
Yeah,
disgusting, and but still, we find ourselves in a place where we're here together,
yeah,
and we gotta figure out a way, to make this. And I don't know if it'll be in our lifetime. I know I could start today. I mean,
right.
I've already started, but each day be a better person and love my fellow man. And but it's gonna take more than that. Like people say, the prayers are great, but like it's gonna
Yeah.
take action. And
Yeah, the time for thoughts and prayers is over. It's time for action. You have to look internally. I don't mean you. I mean, you
right,
as the viewers. You have to look internally to say, are my biases valid? Are my beliefs valid? Or are these things that have been conditioned for me? Instead of, what are the actual facts? if you have a problem with the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'm not talking about the protest, the violence and the rioters, I'm talking about the movement itself, then you have to ask yourself, why do you have a problem with Black people saying enough is enough? Treat me like the person you said I should have been years ago, but still are. Recognize my humanity and stop treating me like a thing. So
Mm.
we have to have more discussions like this for both sides to come together to realize that, you know, scientifically, race is not a thing. It's a stupid societal concept that pretty much white people made up. So to differentiate themselves from everybody else,
Right.
it's illogical. Scientifically, we're human. We're Homo sapiens sapiens. Like that. That's it. There is no other, breakdown classification in the dichotomous key. That doesn't exist.
Right.
So you know it's not that's not how that works. So you have to remember that anything that you think of ethnicity is where you're born. It doesn't mean you're any really different. It just means I have more melanin than you because of my parents and great grandparents and great great grandparents adaptation to the surroundings of where they were born.
Right.
That's all that is.
Right.
So you know we have to remember that it's not, everything is a cultural perception. You know, Europeans coming to Africa back in the 1400s and looking at people and seeing savages, it's not a matter that they were savages. They valued things differently. They were more in tune with the earth. They could care less about diamonds and riches because they were rocks to them. You know,
Yeah.
Nobody cared.
Right.
There's a story in our family where we have our great grandparents used to play jacks with diamonds because they were just rocks for them.
Wow. Wow.
Like
Yeah.
spoons that were like the size of your fist. Like they would play jacks. Like
Yeah.
then they would just in their pocket. They would just have like pebbles, but they were just diamonds
Yeah.
because they didn't mean anything.
Right.
Just like money. Money is not a tangible thing. And that's one thing people have to differentiate with community. We have to build more communities. And when I say community, there are two definitions of community. And I actually just wrote about this the other day, where, and I'll actually read this because it'll be easier for me than to paraphrase my own words, is, the word community has two definitions. The first being a group of people living in the same place or having similar characteristics in common. The second definition, which I believe is more important, is a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. Because scientifically, we're one species with a common goal of living, surviving, and passing along knowledge to the next generation. That's what we have to
Wow.
focus
I love that, man. That is I'm gonna let that sink in, man. I think that's where we're gonna close out. I
on.
think Abdul, man, you're a brilliant man, and a loving person, man. So I aspire to go down the direction you're already doing, and you're setting an example. Thank you for this conversation and for just making each topic as emotional and hard it must be to talk about, because I'm emotional hearing it, what has been done. I can imagine how it must feel as an African American to talk about it. So
Yeah,
thank you for doing that, man. God bless you. Let's continue the dialogue, and I'll see you as soon as things clear up.
yeah, man, for sure. Thank you for giving me the platform to have the conversation. I appreciate it. I love you. I have so much heart for you. You can tell, just talking to you, because I've met you, what, like 3 or 4 times now, where you just being around you is like, it's like being hugged continuously because you have so much um, positive energy. I don't know, you guys have met Paul, or if you haven't, when you're around him, you feel electrified, and it's like a warmth. It's like a warm hug, like a little blanket that just covers you. And I appreciate that because you know, you just want to have fun and you bring the love. And I think that we need more people like that in the world who just want to go through life, enable others, help others, and we need more people to just do that. You know, take the biases out of, you know, your perception. Just approach other people with love, compassion, empathy, and kindness because everybody has their own battles, but if we can
Yes.
just take a second to understand that my battle could be similar to your battle, but just from a different point.
Yes,
So
sir.
that's all it
Uh,
is.
uh, it's about to cut us in a couple seconds. On that note, man, we'll talk offline. And thank you, brother. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
All right.